with the Philadelphia Inquirer in Philadelphia, of course, Trib Live in Pittsburgh, Penn Live in Harrisburg, WITF in Harrisburg, and PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. The event is hosted by Dickinson College and is being held here at the Anita Tuvin Schlechter Auditorium. A special thank you to our other supporting partners, the Pennsylvania News Media Association and the Pennsylvania Women's Forum. Now, before we get to the rules and introduce the candidates tonight, I'd like to introduce you to Deshea Player, President of the Dickinson College Student Senate.
Good evening, and welcome to Dickinson College, including those watching on PCN. As president of Dickinson Student Senate, it is my privilege to welcome you to this debate among Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate. Here at Dickinson, we hold fast to the ideals on which we were founded nearly 240 years ago. That an informed citizenry is essential to the health of a democracy. That is why Dickinson is happy to host this important debate. It is our hope that this debate will encourage the kind of interest among voters that will allow for both engagement and turnout in the upcoming May primary election. I wish all of the candidates good luck.
And now I'd like to introduce Christopher Baxter, the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Spotlight PA, our organizing sponsor. Chris.
Good evening. I'm Christopher Baxter, the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Spotlight PA. Welcome to our second Pennsylvania in the Spotlight 2022 primary debate. Tonight's event is a historic milestone for our state. For the first time in Pennsylvania's modern history, an unprecedented coalition of the state's largest media outlets have joined forces to ensure voters as many voters as possible can hear directly from those who seek to represent them. Collectively, tonight's hosts reach millions of Pennsylvanians in all corners of the state, and each are deeply committed to public service journalism. For those of you who are not familiar with Spotlight PA, we are an independent, nonpartisan newsroom dedicated to investigative and public service journalism about the Pennsylvania state government and urgent statewide issues. Our mission is to hold powerful public and private forces to account through urgent and compelling reporting that empowers voters and drives positive change for the state we all call home. All of our journalism is available to the public at no cost, and that's made possible thanks to people like you. Today, more than 3,000 folks all across the state call themselves members of Spotlight PA and support our work. I want to thank all of our members across the state for their deep commitment to local news in Pennsylvania. And if you don't yet support our journalism, you can learn more about Spotlight PA by visiting spotlightpa.org. Again, spotlightpa.org. I want to thank our host again for tonight's event, Dickinson College, and all of our host partners. And with that, I will turn it back to Scott Lamar to get things underway.
Thanks, Chris. It's time to meet the candidates now. These are the Democratic candidates for the U.S. Senate from Pennsylvania that are participating in tonight's Spotlight PA debate. And you may applaud as each candidate is introduced. Going left to right, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. Jenkintown Councilwoman Alexandria Khalil. And Congressman Connor Lamb. I'm going to take a seat as we go over the rules, okay? Now, I mentioned applauding as we were introducing the candidates, but one of the rules we have throughout the 90 minutes of the debate is that you hold your applause or cheering or reacting until the end of the debate. Candidates are allotted a 60-second opening statement and a 30-second closing statement. Most of the debate is divided into a series of topics, each beginning with a question posed to a specific candidate, followed by each of the other candidates answering the same question. Both the moderator and the questioners are permitted to ask follow-up questions. Candidates must wait to be asked a question by the moderator or a questioner or to be called on during open discussion before speaking. We will alternate which candidates answer in what order. Candidates cannot interrupt or speak over other candidates or the moderator or questioners. Candidates who are directly criticized during open discussion are allotted 30 seconds to respond, but only after the moderator calls on them. Now, let me introduce you to our journalists tonight. The candidates will be questioned by 3 journalists: Julia Taruso of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Paula Reed Ward of Trib Live, and Evie DeJesus of Penn Live. And notice we have 3 women journalists asking questions tonight. So we'll start by having the candidates make their opening statements, and we'll go left to right before we start asking the questions. So Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, you have 60 seconds with an opening statement.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, and I'm running for the United States Senate here in our beautiful Commonwealth. And I'd like to point out that running for the U.S. Senate here is a statewide affair, and I'm the only candidate on the Democratic or Republican side that has run and won statewide here in Pennsylvania. And I'm running a campaign based on core democratic values and principles, things like making sure our minimum wage is something that you can actually live on with dignity and security, that holding up that universal voting rights and protections is critical to maintaining our democracy and making sure we push back against the big lie, that women's reproductive freedom is non-negotiable and it's a sacred right. And finally, that the union way of life and promoting union values is absolutely critical, not only to our middle class, but to our country as a whole as well, too. If you trust me with your vote in May, you'll always have my vote in Washington, D.C. We're running a true grassroots campaign all across Pennsylvania in every one of Pennsylvania's 67 counties.
Representative Kenyatta.
Thank you. Good evening. And I'm really excited to be here. I think most Pennsylvanians will agree with me that the Senate is broken. And turns out, if you want to change the Senate, you got to change the senators. And in this moment, we need more than just another politician asking for your vote. We need somebody who understands your life. I grew up in a working poor family in North Philadelphia. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a home health care aide. They separated when I was pretty young. And so what that meant for me is I lived 6 different places by the time I graduated high school. I got my first job at the age of 12, washing dishes at this little vegan soul food restaurant. And I'd watch my mom, who worked 12, 16 hours a day, come home after making sure the folks she served got their medicine on time, only to have to ration her insulin. If we're going to win this race, we're going to need a candidate who can go anywhere and everywhere and speak with a level of urgency and authenticity about what's broken, and I look forward to being that candidate. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Councilwoman Khalil.
Good evening, Carlisle, and good evening, Pennsylvania. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Alexandria Khalil. Please call me Alex. I am the daughter of Hind and Faisal Khalil, Palestinian immigrants from this beautiful village called Al-Mazar Sharqiya in Palestine. I'm a borough councilor, a mom of a dyslexic son, an activist, a lawyer, a worker, an IT worker. And I can tell you the reason I'm running is because I'm one of you. Every day I get up, I go to work, I've held a business, I have gone to businesses that are no longer in here. They're bankrupt, they're gone, the jobs have been sent abroad. One of the greatest things that have happened to me since I've started this race is I got to know Pennsylvania. And I got to know that you are an amazing state, and every day is a special moment when I am in your company and in your pleasure. And I want to tell you that between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh is a society and a country and a state that is rich, generous, and kind. I hope you'll consider me in the primary. Thank you very much.
Congressman Lamb.
Thank you very much for watching. These debates breathe a little bit of life into our democracy, and I think we very badly need it. People all over this state can afford less and less on the same paycheck and the same Social Security check. And the future of our democracy may depend on our answers to the struggles that they're going through right now. If I'm your nominee, I will run a campaign that is focused on how to make your Social Security check bigger, beyond what Medicare can take away. I will talk about how this specific job, my vote in the Senate, can actually make the price of your drugs go down, make your out-of-pocket costs go down, make your student loan debt go down, make your child care costs go down to 7% of what you earn every month. With me, you wouldn't be nominating a Twitter account. I've gotten results on every single one of those items mentioned in the House of Representatives, and all I'm looking to do is accomplish the same result in the United States Senate. That's why Democrats and swing voters have voted for me 3 times. They'll do it again if you'll give me a chance.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get into our questioning now. And again, the candidates have 60 seconds to respond. There could be some follow-ups as we go along. Representative Kenyatta, we're going to start with you, and Julia will ask the first question.
Hello, everyone. Even some Democratic economists have said the Biden administration spent too much and that its policies have contributed to rising inflation. Do you agree, and what specific policies would you support in the Senate to combat inflation?
Thank you so much for that question. And folks at home have heard this over and over and over again. Whenever we invest in working people and actual people, you hear about how it's unaffordable, how it doesn't make sense. You didn't hear that when it was time to bail out the big banks. You don't hear it when it's time to give another tax break to somebody who's well off and well connected. But when we do things like the child tax credit, which actually lifted millions of kids out of deep poverty, you hear hemming and hawing from people who were fine with the status quo. But here's the reality. I want to hear from these economists what they think we ought not invest in. Do they think we shouldn't do anything about the cost of childcare? Should we ignore the fact that people are paying more at the pump? We should do nothing about that. I'm just not sure what investments they think we made in the American Rescue Plan that didn't make sense. We want to lower costs. We have to build more things here at home. We have to make sure that we're increasing people's paychecks, and that's the types of things I'm going to do at the U.S. Senate.
Time. Can I follow up for just a second, Representative?
Yeah,
the question, though, was did that investment, as you referred to it, contribute to inflation?
I don't think that that's true. You're seeing inflation all across the world, and every country did not make the same investments we made in the American Rescue Plan. The things that we want to do, you take a look at the American Innovation and Competition Act. That is something that would help us build more things at home that would deal with some of the supply chain issues that have led to rising costs. Obviously, this pandemic has led to rising costs as well. But what I've been talking about is how do we lower hard costs that people have, prescription drugs, child care, health care. These are things that can help people in their pocketbook.
Councilwoman Khalil?
Excellent points. And I want to point out, to answer your question, no, I don't. What you haven't asked is about price gouging. This weekend, I was in Schuylkill County, and I met a gentleman who was an independent. And he said to me, Biden lost me. And I go, why? He goes, what isn't he doing about inflation? What is he doing about gas pricing? I said, well, you understand there's price gouging going on. He goes, yes, I know. Why isn't he doing something about it? That's why we have inflation. We have price gouging going on, and no one is calling out the enormous bonuses that CEOs are getting, the enormous profitability. I want to make clear to everyone, no company has gone bankrupt during this so-called inflation. On the contrary, we are seeing record profits and record CEO pay. So who is paying? The American people are paying. They're paying through gas. And I'm here to tell the president, and I will tell you, I myself will act very decisively. Be decisive. Go after the price gougers.
All right, well, I just said time, but I'll follow up anyway. What evidence do you have that there's price gouging?
When you have more profits, we are more profitable now, our companies are more profitable now, and CEO pay is higher now than it was before the pandemic. Before even wages were at like $7 an hour, at $10 an hour, inflation was, their profits are higher now. That is price gouging.
Congressman Lamb, same question, 60 seconds, whether You think that the Biden administration spent too much? Did it contribute to inflation? How do you get it under control if you are in the Senate?
Sure. My goal is going to be to answer you the first time on this one. I voted for the CARES Act, COVID relief money, and the American Rescue Plan that infused a lot of money into the American economy at a time when we very seriously needed it. There is a debate right now among these academic types about whether the inflation is driven by supply, meaning the pandemic and the war, two things that are no one's fault in this room or in our government, or driven by all the extra money that came in as a result of the pandemic. It's a valid debate. There are strong points on both sides. What I always come back to, though, is if you're in January of 2021 when Joe Biden got sworn in, nobody knew what turns were left in the road of the pandemic, how many people would be thrown out of work and not get their unemployment benefits on time, how many people would be evicted if they didn't get that last stimulus check to see them through the last several months. So I always ask the Republicans, what would you have done? I mean, we know they would have taken that money away from the people that needed the most. But what I think voters are asking is, what are you doing next? And that's where we have to talk about the costs we can control and the fact that we're trying to raise taxes to shrink the deficit, which is an anti-inflationary measure.
Time. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, we have 60 seconds.
I'm going to directly answer and say, no, I don't believe it is. And if so, I believe that I'm always going to come down on the side of investments in the middle class and families. And that's really what the American Rescue Plan was all predicated on, was making these critical core investments, whether it's childcare or infrastructure or other things, to make sure that people were being properly supported during the pandemic. Remember this, inflation is a tax on working families. And the Biden administration understands this and is taking all the appropriate steps, I think, to continue to attack it. I think one of the most important things we can do is drive down the cost of fuel prices. People notice that when they fill up their vehicles, suspending the gas tax and making sure that we produce more energy of our own here in the United States. And also, we're developing a sense of inflation as well, too, because of the logistical logjam, because we are not making enough stuff here in this country. We must create more manufacturing to straighten out the logistical and supply chain issues that have helped contribute to this inflation logjam.
Thank you. Evie DeJesus of Penn Live has our next question, and it goes to Councilwoman Khalil.
Councilwoman Khalil, President Biden said in his State of the Union address that the answer to rising violent crime is not to defund police, but to fund police. What specific policies would you support in the Senate to fight crime and gun violence?
I do not support defunding the police, so I want to be very clear about that. I support renewal of the economic and spiritual and mental health of a community. We need to do that. So first of all, we need to bring back jobs, as all my colleagues have talked about. So we have to start there. We have to bring back and invest in mental health care. And we have to invest in our schools, in our education. And we need to have Pennsylvanians, especially those who are committing this crime, to have faith and hope again in our society. And we need to crack down on crime. We need to get tough on crime. But we also need to remember that we can fight crime and work on criminal justice. So I think that we can sit back and properly fund our police, make sure they're paid well, make sure their pensions are paid, and make sure that our schools are properly funded, that their job trainings, that their community centers are opened. Yeah, we can invest again in our communities. And by doing that, we can sit back and fight crime.
Do you support a federal assault weapons ban? And if so, how would that be enforced?
I do not support assault weapons, and I do support a ban. I, however, do not want to take away those who've already owned their assault weapons. I would like to do a buyback if possible, but if you bought your own assault weapon legally, I am not for taking away people's arms. I don't want us to go out and sell some more, but if you bought it legally, I have no problem with that. I'd like to see locks on guns. I'd like to see safes on guns. I'd like to see proper education in terms of guns. But that is not the issue. You talk about assault weapons when what we're seeing is handgun crimes.
Okay, let me just follow up on that, because we're going to be talking a little bit later about the number of gun owners in this state. Mm-hmm. One of the things that a gun owner, someone who is familiar with guns, will say, what is an assault weapon? In your mind, what's an assault weapon?
Well, they are military-style weapons. That's what I think about assault weapons. But, you know, we do have a Second Amendment right to own a gun. And to me, it is not owning, to me, we're not really focusing on illegal sale of guns, gun trafficking. Those are things we really need to be focused on. How is a 14-year-old getting a gun? That is what we need to ask ourselves. What is the situation in which literally, in my mind, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old to 18, 19-year-olds are almost committing suicide this way? Thank you.
Congressman?
Sure. The president was right when he said that. As far as what I would just like to, I feel almost an obligation to say at these moments that the only people that have ever voted against funding for the police since I've been in Washington were the Republican Party when they voted against the American Rescue Plan that had $350 billion in it for local governments, which in my home county of Allegheny went to the police. That was police overtime money and police salary money. But as far as what we need to do about violent crime right now, there's a shift that has to take place where we focus a lot more on firearms trafficking. Almost all of the serious shootings that you read about, especially in our inner cities, are committed by someone who was not legally entitled to possess that firearm. I used to prosecute these cases for a living. We're pretty good at them. We don't do nearly enough of them. We still do far more nonviolent drug prosecutions and investigations than we do a serious effort to interdict these illegal sales and transfers of firearms. I'd want to get on the Judiciary Committee, help increase the budget for the ATF, the training and resources available to that agency to really take this on.
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
Yeah, I'm the only Democrat or Republican on the other side that's actually been in charge of a police department for nearly 14 years as Mayor of Braddock. And I fought to increase their wages. I fought to shore up their benefits. And I fought to increase budgets consistently every year. Furthermore, I'm incredibly proud of the work that we achieved working together. We have a community of Braddock that had a significant gun violence problem. And the thing I'm most proud of as mayor was to achieve stopping all homicides for a period of 5.5 years. Has never been accomplished before or since. And we did it by creating an effective community policing model that understands we need to make investments in the community, but we also need to make investments in the police force. We need to make sure that we are practicing the best kind of community policing to get their buy-in. And I'm proud to say to be reelected 4 terms of a community 75% black that originally had a deep suspicion of our police department to go 5.5 years without the loss of life through a very effective strategy of adding resources to the community, but effective policing strategy as well.
All right, let me ask you, for context's sake, before that 5.5-year period, how many homicides did Braddock have on average each year?
Pretty regular. You can always count Braddock, for context, is a smaller community in the Mon Valley. It's about 75% black, and it was essentially written off as kind of like a hopeless place. And I actually came there to teach GED classes to students, and I ended up getting into my, running for public office because 2 of my students were gunned down. So it was common to hear a lot of gunshots. It was common to have these kind of murders. And that's what gun violence actually brought me into my career in public service.
But how many on average homicides in a year?
A couple every year.
Okay, all right. Representative Kenyatta?
Well, thank you so much. Listen, I sort of reject this notion, particularly as a black man in this country, that the only 2 options I have is to have no police or to have police who aren't held accountable when they do something they should not do, specifically as we've seen tragic instances of police violence. And so what I want is to see us making investments in things that actually make communities safe. Police officers are a part of that. But I talk about all the time America's basic bargain, this idea that you have one good job, that your kids can go to a good school, that you have a health care and affordable prescription drugs, that you can retire with a level of dignity. Communities that have the things I just laid out briefly, those are safer communities. And so if we want safer communities, we need to invest in people, make sure people have good jobs, stable housing. Those are things that we know deal with the root cause of crime. We also need to pass many common sense gun safety measures, including a number of which I voted for and introduced as a state legislator.
Let me follow up on that. What you just laid out about jobs, education, investing in the community, we've known that for a long time, or at least most people have known that for a long time. We're in an emergency right now. I mean, Philadelphia is setting records for the number of homicides. The Allegheny County had a horrific incident just a couple weeks ago. What can you do in the Senate? What should the Senate, the president, anyone, what should we be doing right now?
Well, you're right. We've known what to do for a long time. That's the problem with Washington, D.C. We're not at a lack of good ideas. We're at a lack of actual political leadership. But I think it's really interesting what you heard the lieutenant governor say. He talks about this community policing model that apparently if he's not the mayor, that community policing model doesn't work. So when he says you've never seen it since he left, I want to understand what you were doing that wasn't actually a policy proposal that lasted beyond your time in office. And I think it's also important for people to know the woman who replaced you as mayor endorsed me.
Since he mentioned you in particular, Lieutenant Governor, do you like to respond?
I want to address. You made a good point there. It's like what I would do is, like, first of all, we need to eliminate the filibuster in the Senate. If you want comprehensive gun reform legislation, gun control legislation in the Senate, you have to eliminate the filibuster. Otherwise, you're waiting on 10 Republicans to vote with the Democrats to make sure that we don't have weapons of war, that we have red flag laws. So that's first and foremost to do that as a country. And in Braddock, we actually created the largest summer youth employment program. We actually opened playgrounds. We actually opened and created basketball courts. So we had a balanced approach.
I was wondering if I could answer, because he actually did indirectly address me when he said he was the only candidate that had a police department.
Okay, I'll say indirect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jenkintown actually has its own police department, and I sit on the Public Safety Committee. So yes, I do understand police departments. Jenkintown has 36,000 people that drive through Jenkintown every day. We have our own train station and buses. Our train station is the second busiest terminal outside of Philadelphia. So what does that mean? We believe in community policing. Our police officers are out there. We properly fund our police department's pensions and their pay. But what else we do is we make sure that our schools are properly funded, that our kids have something to do, and our kids go to college.
Time. All right, next question. Paul, you'll be asking this question of Congressman Conor Lamb.
Hi, Congressman Lamb. Given Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, what is your position on sending American troops there? And would you support the agreement that requires the United States to defend a NATO ally with troops on the ground?
Well, the agreement to defend a NATO ally with troops on the ground has existed since long before I was a congressman or even born. The only time that treaty has ever been invoked is to our benefit. When we were attacked on 9/11, the countries of NATO responded by sending their troops to Afghanistan to risk their lives for us. So that's what NATO means. If a NATO country gets attacked in this conflict with Ukraine, you better believe I'm going to support the sending of U.S. troops. They're already there. They're sitting in Poland and Romania and Germany and all these places ready to go, because if America is your friend, that's what you get. There's no better friend and there's no worse enemy. Now, with respect to Ukraine in particular, I think the stated policy of our government should be that we will help the Ukrainians win the war and send Putin and his army back where they came from, no matter what. Right now, that means we're gradually escalating the specific types of military aid that we give them: vehicles, artillery, drones, anti-aircraft weapons. And we can continue to increase that, use better intelligence, better resources as this thing goes on. But the key is we don't give up.
If I could, I would like to follow up on that. While you mentioned the notion of America continuing to escalate to help Ukraine win, you didn't actually answer the question whether you believe that troops from the United States should go to Ukraine.
I'm sorry, you actually asked if I believe troops should go to a NATO ally, which I did answer. But with respect to
the first part of the question was whether or not we should send American troops there.
To Ukraine.
Yes.
Correct. Right now, that is not called for. It's not needed. What they need from us is our military aid that we're sending them. If Russia attacks a NATO ally in the course of its attacks on Ukraine, it's a different situation. Then the requirement to defend our NATO allies could have us send troops to all sorts of places, but that is not the situation we're in right now.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, you have 60 seconds.
Emphatically, no, we should not be sending American troops to the Ukraine. We should rightly help the Ukrainian people during their unjust invasion and war of aggression by Russia. I want to be very clear about that. But we cannot, and I believe President Biden has done an excellent job on this, risk engaging in a hot war with Russia. We just can't afford to take that risk. The bottom line is we can add humanitarian aid. We can add some weapon systems. But if we're mindful, need to remember that we're here to help the Ukrainians, and nothing would harm the Ukrainians more, in my opinion, than us sliding into a hot war, being having troops on the ground in Ukraine and escalating into theoretically World War III.
NATO?
I'm sorry?
Would you support NATO's second part of her question about?
Well, yeah, I mean, as Congressman Lamb pointed out, the pre-existing conditions of NATO have existed for as long as the organization has. Yes.
Okay. Representative Kenyatta?
Thank you. You know, Article 5 is obviously, we negotiate it, we have to stand by it. And of course, if Putin is dumb enough and reckless enough to go into a NATO country, obviously that will make this crisis even worse. But if you look at what's happening right now, Vladimir Putin is paying a real cost for his barbaric and senseless war. What we need is a ratcheting down of tensions and pressure. What we need is a ceasefire. We do that by continuing the approach that the Biden administration has taken. That's why I'm so proud to have endorsed him on the day he announced, earlier than anybody on the stage, because I believed he would be ready for a moment like this, where he's brought together our NATO allies. Just last week, they sent even more resources to Ukraine to make sure they can defend themselves and push back. President Zelensky, in a press conference today, talked about the number of areas that Ukrainian forces have recaptured. This was a big mistake on the part of Vladimir Putin. And what I've called for is the expansion of NATO, especially with Finland, who I know is looking at it right now.
Okay. Let's go to Councilwoman Khalil.
I compliment my colleagues here, and I agree with their stance there. And I do not believe that we should send troops to the Ukraine. One of the things I do want to point out in speaking to the community, and I have gone out to the rural areas, I've gone to Norristown and Montgomery County, Philadelphia. Everyone supports helping the Ukraine. But one of the things that has really struck a lot of Americans is that when it comes to helping Americans, then they're told, go take a loan. There's an area in Norristown that got flooded. There is an area in Eastwick in Philadelphia that were flooded. And they're told, well, if you have a small business, you've got to go out and take a loan. A small business loan. And they see the hundreds of millions of dollars going to Ukraine. No one says that's bad. No one. But you just asked here about the rising cost of inflation because we were helping Americans. So I'd like us, everyone, to remember that when it comes to helping Americans, let's be okay with helping our fellow Americans and not call it, say, inflation. Thank you.
All right, our next question will be asked by Julie Taruso of the Philadelphia Inquirer to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
The United States Supreme Court appears poised to overturn or weaken Roe v. Wade. Texas has already effectively banned most abortions in the state, and the court has signaled it may uphold a Mississippi law that bans abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. What specific policies in the Senate would you support to protect abortion access, and are there any limits on abortion you would find appropriate?
Yeah, great question. And let me just say that I am profoundly proud to be the first line of defense in the veto chain in Pennsylvania should Governor Wolf be unable to perform his duty to veto down and strike down these Texas-like laws that the state legislature constantly sends up. I believe that a woman's reproductive freedom is sacred, and I believe that it's settled case law, and we can never go backwards on that regard. If I'm in the United States Senate, I would immediately support the first campaign to support the elimination of the filibuster to make sure that we codify women's reproductive freedom in law to make sure that even if the Supreme Court does go down that road and eliminate or revoke Roe v. Wade, that we already existingly codify that into law and make sure that we can't go back. Abortions are going to continue in America whether it's legal or not. They just won't be safe if they're illegal, and we can't ever go back to that. We just can't.
And are there any limits on abortion you would find appropriate?
I don't believe so, no. I believe that is between a woman and her physician, and it's certainly not between me or any politician. We settled this decades ago, and the fact that these states are trying to repeal it it's just, we have to push back against that because it's started in Texas, and I will be, and also I want to say, I'm proud to say that if I am voting on a Supreme Court justice, that is a core litmus test that Roe v. Wade and the sanctity of women's reproductive freedom must always come first. It's non-negotiable.
A litmus test. So that means that if someone says that they question Roe v. Wade, they don't have your vote.
They don't. If they don't support Roe v. Wade, they would not earn my vote. I feel that strongly about women's reproductive freedom and how settled of a case law it is in the United States.
Representative?
You know, this is where being a legislator actually matters, because I haven't just talked about it. I've actually introduced legislation to deal with the fact that there are so many instances right now in Pennsylvania where there are barriers to women being able to have access to basic health care. And this is health care. At the federal level, we need to pass what's called the Women's Health Protection Act. Myself and Representative Cephas, who's the co-chair of the Women's Health Caucus in Pennsylvania, bipartisan caucus, actually introduced legislation called the Pennsylvania Women's Health Protection Act to get rid of the barriers that currently exist for Pennsylvanian women under current law. The states have been the battleground for this issue for a long time. And because the Supreme Court has refused to step in and uphold decades-long precedent, they have tactically already overruled Roe. That has already happened. And so whether it was as an activist, as the first male ever elected to the board for the National Organization for Women in Philadelphia, whether it's as a legislator, I've already stood up for this basic right, and I will every step of the way. And when it comes to any limitations, there's always a limit, but that limit is between a woman and her doctor, not for us.
I want to follow up on that since the Lieutenant Governor brought it up. Yeah. Litmus test? Or
oh, hell yeah, that's a litmus test.
Woohoo. Councilwoman Khalil.
You know, it helps to be a woman to discuss this issue. It helps to be the daughter of a woman. You asked about late-term abortions, because I'd like to start there. When I was a little girl, my mother was pregnant, and the child had water in the brain. And the doctors told my mom, my mother's life was at risk, and it was health care. They asked my mom, we really believe you should have an abortion. And my mother's a devout Muslim and said, absolutely not. So now this is where, what else would I do? I agree with my colleagues, but what else would I do? My mother was offered amazing care. She was put into the hospital, and we, the children home, we were little, 5, 4, 3. We were given a nurse to take care of us, to take us to school. To me, it is not just this, it's real. It happened to my family. And my mother made a decision, which was her choice. And from there, the state of New York truly showed what pro-choice is about. So I would make sure that we have pre- and postnatal care. Thank you.
But let me follow up. I'm going to ask all of you this question now. Litmus test?
Oh, definitely. I mean, think about what would happen to my mom if, she had a choice. She could have said yes, right? Either way, she was going to, if she didn't have it and she didn't get the care, she would have died. So yes, abortion rights are health care, but it must be included with pre- and postnatal care. It must be included with nutrition. It must be included what happens when a family has an emergency and needs someone to care for their small children while a mother is in the hospital trying to give birth. We have a ridiculously high, it is disgraceful, women mortality rate in Pennsylvania.
Congressman Lamb.
The first time I ran for office, it was in a congressional district that Trump won by 19 percentage points. It really heavily favored the Republicans. And the week before the election, a writer from a conservative news magazine kind of jumped out at me on the street and stuck a microphone in my face and said, "You haven't said yet in this campaign where you stand on late-term abortion. Where do you stand?" And my instinctive answer was, if a right is a right, it's a right the whole way through pregnancy. And that has always been my position. This is a constitutional right that women have, and that they deserve to have, and that they deserve to continue to have. And the question in this campaign is not, who has believed what the longest or how they can describe it. It is who can actually get through this election year in 2022, win this race, and cast that vote. Without winning this Senate seat, there will be no Women's Health Protection Act. There will be no repeal of the Hyde Amendment. None. It will be left to we won't even get to put another justice on the Supreme Court while Joe Biden is president if we don't win this Senate seat. Those are the stakes. They're incredibly high, and I just hope that our viewers will continue to think about that.
Question for everyone. A litmus test for a Supreme Court nominee?
The litmus test for me is settled constitutional law. Roe v. Wade is that. So is Brown v. Board of Education. So is the right to get a Miranda warning when you're arrested. They're all at the same level of strength, meaning they have been upheld tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of times in the last 50 years. This is settled. It should remain the same. I would only vote for a justice that supports it.
All right, we're going to do something a little bit different, changing up from our questions from our journalists. We call this a lightning round. I don't know how much of a lightning round it is. I mean, you have 30 seconds as opposed to 60 seconds to answer a question. And I think, Representative Kenyatta, it's your turn first.
The guinea pig.
Yeah.
Here we go.
If you can ask one of your opponents a question, what would it be?
It would be the question I asked John just a couple of days ago, and he's had a chance to think about it, I'm sure, of whether or not the lieutenant governor is going to apologize here. Now we're in Carlisle, so maybe you have a change of heart, for chasing down an unarmed black man with a 20-gauge shotgun, holding it to his chest. I'm not going to hold my breath for John's answer. I'm sure he won't apologize, as he hasn't multiple times. But here's the problem. Powerful men like John are used to having to play by a different set of rules. He wasn't held accountable because he was the mayor, and he's trying to not be held accountable now.
Lieutenant Governor?
That's just not what happened. And I want everybody at home to understand how personal the issue of gun violence was to me. You know, Braddock, for context, is a 75% black community that had a significant gun violence program. I came there 20 years ago to be a GED instructor, ran for mayor because 2 of my students were gunned down in a very violent way. During my time as mayor, I'm proud to say that we addressed that, stopped the killing, because I've always believed that community policing and...
Time. But did you point the gun at the man's chest?
I did not.
He says you did.
I did not.
He says he did. Also, the police report at the time said it. And again, you don't have to take my word for it, because with powerful folks like John, any type of accountability feels like persecution. But John is not the victim here. At the time, he said he thought he committed a crime, and then he uses his re-election in Braddock as another justification for why he doesn't have to apologize. John got 186 votes in that election. 186.
Let me be clear. I was reelected in an overwhelming fashion in a community 75% black.
With 186 votes, John.
Malcolm, I'm not sure why you'd want to diminish a small marginalized black.
But
the point of the matter is that the people that reelected me know that that's not what this is about. I never pointed the weapon at anyone, and everyone in town understood that protection of the community was always in my heart, and that's what it was always consistently about.
Councilwoman Khalil, you can ask anyone a question on the panel.
On the panel. What would you do to Mr. Kenyatta? You want to end fracking. I believe that's you said you want. Let me. Okay.
Yeah, let her ask the question. Okay. Go from there.
So, what do you propose for? What kind of energy source would you use for manufacturing and keeping manufacturing in Pennsylvania?
Well, thank you for asking that question. And so for folks at home, if you want an environmental champion as your next senator, clearly there's only one person on the stage for you. My position has been very clear that we should not approve new permits for new drilling. We know right now that even across the country, we have 9,000 plus permits right now that are approved where there is no drilling. And so companies who already have those permits, they could do more drilling if they want to right now. We have to stop acting as if big polluters care about their workers, and this is about the workers. Those big polluters don't give a damn about workers.
That wasn't the question. I asked you didn't ask how are you going to bring manufacturing? No. It was about what will you do for manufacturing? We need energy to manufacture. You can't do it. We don't currently have. If you get rid of the fracking, we get rid of oil, how are we going to manufacture and keep jobs in Pennsylvania? That's really the question.
Will you answer that?
No.
Oh, okay. Congressman?
Thank you. My question is also for the Lieutenant Governor. One of my grave concerns about his candidacy is that I don't believe he can appeal to the types of swing voters that we need to win in November. These are the types of people I've been campaigning around for the last 4 years. They've elected me in districts that favor Republicans, and they, if anything, play an outsized role in a midterm election year like this one. They don't like chaos. They don't like instability. And they're very, very concerned about both inflation and the overall size of the national debt. So my question for John is very simple. It's a yes or no. Do you still support Medicare for all. Would you vote
Time.
for the Medicare
Time.
for all bill? Yes or no?
Thank you, Connor. I support universal health care. I support health care as a basic fundamental human right. I support whatever means gets us there, whether that's the Affordable Care Act, whether that's the public option, whether that's Medicare for all. I am for allowing Congress and the federal government to negotiate for lower drug prices. I am for lowering the Medicare eligibility age. I am for adding vision, dental, and hearing as well, too. I am for making sure that Americans have greater access to health care.
Yeah, but to his question, Medicare for all, do you
Yes.
support?
And I answered that. I said, whatever mechanism gets us closer
He's
to
allergic to answering
healthcare,
questions. It's
to
unbelievable.
healthcare as a fundamental human right, I'm going to support. If Connor wants to be for the insurance companies, that's his right. But I'm for healthcare and making sure that it's a fundamental human right for every American. And making sure that we can negotiate for better drug prices is at the heart of that immediately.
But, he said yes, no, and I would like to get a yes, no as well. I mean, when you say getting closer, does that mean Medicare for all?
It means whatever's in front of us as a Congress to get greater access to health care for America. And my vote is decisive. I would absolutely support it.
That's how you know a 20-year politician. He's not give you a yes or no.
I'd like to say I support it.
Do
I
you?
support Medicare for all. I support a.
I should have just asked you.
No, well, I support. Because I can answer it. Because you know what? This weekend I was in Schuylkill County and I met a woman who didn't have health insurance. Con.
All right.
All right. That's real.
You didn't
That's
answer
not
the
a
question,
joke.
but,
Yes, I do.
Okay. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, it is your opportunity to ask a question of one of the other panel members.
Yeah. Connor, it's for Representative Lamb. How do you feel about your endorsement, Joe Manchin endorsing you through this race? And would you vote similarly to him in the Senate? You know, my fear is that I think we have one Joe Manchin is enough in the Senate, and his endorsement of you in this race I found troubling because I absolutely disagree with his voting record.
Let him answer your question then.
Yeah, to be honest, when John says that, I'm not sure what he's referring to. When I was a member of Congress, I held fundraisers with many senators and other members of Congress, including Senator Manchin, again, when I was a member of Congress, not a Senate candidate. And the question of how we vote is actually already answered by our actual votes. We both have voting records. I voted for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act 3 times and said we should get rid of the filibuster. I voted for the Women's Health Protection Act. I voted for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I voted for the Build Back Better Act. To my knowledge, he's been against all 4 of those things.
Time.
Can I-
Go ahead, sure.
Joe Manchin is Connor's mentor, and he did host a fundraiser for Connor. And he just said recently that he would make a heck of a senator. So, I mean, that's an endorsement. And I'm just saying, do you embrace Joe Manchin's endorsement of you in 2020? It's, you wanted a yes/no answer, and I'm asking you, yes or no? Do you embrace Joe Manchin's endorsement in the 2022 election?
Well, you have as hard of a time asking questions as you have answering them. Again, when I was a member of Congress, he appeared at a fundraiser for me and expressed his support for me as a member of Congress. I accepted it then. Of course I did. My voting record is what it is. I'll work with any Democrat to get things done. I have no problem with that
But
at all.
I'll
And
hold
if you're
you
asking
the same rules, yes or no?
the question is factually incorrect, but if you're asking me if I'll accept the support of a Democratic senator who supports my campaign, absolutely.
Joe Manchin supported. He said you'd make a heck of a senator. And I'm saying, do you embrace his endorsement? Yes or no?
See, while they're talking about this, people at home want to know what we're going to do actually as their next senator. And here's the good news for folks watching at home. You don't have to vote for either of them.
You can vote for
You
me.
can actually vote for Malcolm Kidney.
You can vote for Alex Khalil. But I think a Joe Manchin, I think this is really important. Why bring up Joe Manchin? Joe Manchin has been the state senator, the governor, and U.S. senator for West Virginia, and he's driven it into the ground. We must not allow that to happen for Pennsylvania. We must lift Pennsylvania. We must make sure we clean up our state, we bring back jobs, we improve education, that Pennsylvanians go up in the quality of life, not go down.
All
we
right.
can never become West Virginia we cannot ever allow any politician to do what Joe Manchin did to West Virginia.
All right, on this question, it's a little bit different. I'm going to ask for you to raise your hands. In a way, kind of a yes-no question, but for democracy-related questions. And I believe this goes to Representative Kenyatta.
I'll take it. Sign me up.
Oh, they're not just all raised.
Oh, no, they're all going to get it. Oh, that's right. Okay. Sorry, the moderator screws up too. But I'm going to ask 4 questions about democracy and just get you to raise your hand.
Okay.
Raise your hand if you support the positions or issues I mentioned, and then we'll discuss afterwards. Raise your hand if you support abolishing the Electoral College.
And this is as a group, right?
That's right.
But maybe I'm alone. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And we will go back. Eliminating the Senate filibuster. All 4. Okay. Expanding the number of justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay. Making the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico U.S. states. Okay. All right, so let's go back to where there was some disagreement. Abolishing the Electoral College. Representative Kenyatta, why do you want to abolish the Electoral College?
Well, for folks at home who care about abolishing the Electoral College, yet again, you only have one option on this stage. The Electoral College serves no purpose other than to continue to muddy up this idea that there should be one person and one vote. I will tell you on this stage, if any one of us gets one more vote than the other person, that person will be the Democratic nominee. And yet with the Electoral College, we've seen multiple elections now where the person who got the most votes did not become president. That is a problem, and I think it erodes people's faith in our elections.
I'll get the other 3 candidates to answer this as well. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, why don't you want to abolish the Electoral College?
I don't, and because we're Democrats. We can't be in a position where we are contradicting ourselves. If we go after the Republicans, understandably, that they're frustrated by an outcome and they go to delegitimize it or to go change the structure of it, as they attempted to do with our own Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania and change the underlying rules there. I believe that we as a party need to remain logically consistent on these things, and we need to make sure that we're not changing the structure of our government at a fundamental level based on whether we like the outcome or not.
Councilwoman?
No, I do not believe in abolishing the Electoral College. You know, President Obama, a guy named Barack Hussein Obama, a man of mixed race, won twice. He won the Electoral College and he won the popular vote. Bill Clinton won as well. You win elections, you lose elections. We cannot act like the last president and just get upset and say, well, we're going to change the Electoral College. We need to have our candidates. I mean, hey, Joe Biden won the Electoral College and he won the popular vote. What's more important is that our candidates speak clearly and have a clear message.
Congressman Lamb?
I actually think if we were starting our society over again from scratch, it would make a lot of sense not to have an electoral college. But we have one, and to get rid of it, you would have to amend the Constitution. Anybody who doesn't know how difficult that is, just look it up. It's not happening. It makes this discussion completely academic, in my view.
Can I respond to this? Sure. Because I think to suggest that abolishing the Electoral College, which is a relic of the past, which has not served us, is the same as Trump trying to overturn the last election, I find pretty offensive and makes no sense. Also, this idea that we're Democrats, we don't try to change anything, or, well, it's in the Constitution, therefore it's hard, so we shouldn't try to change anything. I mean, that does not make a lot of sense. The Constitution has mechanisms by which it could be changed because our founders understood it was a living, breathing document. I'm running for U.S. Senate because there's a lot of stuff we have to change, and that's what we should do as Democrats.
Expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court. Could I see your hands again?
I think it was just, was it? Okay, good.
This is, okay, so it's just the 2 of you.
Yes, just 2.
Okay, Congresswoman. Yeah, I'll start with you. Oh, did I say Congresswoman?
That's okay, you can call me, that's fine. People in Jenkintown would love it. Well, I would tell you the reason is, you know, everyone here will argue, well, we're Democrats, we don't change. But what has happened is that this particular Supreme Court has decided it wants to overturn everything from the New Deal. Their desire is that our way of life, they want to overturn. They have been planning this for a long time with the Federalist Society. In particular, Sam Alito. They have been planning steadily to go ahead and erode the entire New Deal philosophies and policies, Social Security,
Time.
Medicare.
Time. Representative Kenyatta?
First of all, this is not a new idea. I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. We've expanded the number of justices on the bench multiple times throughout the history of our country. I think that it was Mitch McConnell, not Democrats, who packed the court. When Mitch McConnell did not allow President Obama to actually appoint somebody when it was his turn, to ram through Amy Coney Barrett in opposition of the same rule that he made up to deny President Obama a seat on the bench. The Supreme Court has its lowest public trust than it's ever had.
Time.
We have to fix that.
Time. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, why don't you support that?
It's the same underlying logic. Just in the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, the Republicans were outraged. They were unhappy with the judgments of the Supreme Court, duly elected Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania, and now they wanted to change our Constitution to change how it was elected. That would almost guarantee that we would have a permanent Republican Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania. The Democratic Party does not rig the rules just simply because we do not like the outcome. I wish we had a 6-3 Democratic majority in the Supreme Court, but the fact is that we don't, and I don't believe fundamentally altering the structure of the Supreme Court is the answer.
Congressman Lamb?
Yeah, I mean, I just think this whole question is a trap. One of the things I'm trying to convey here is I've spent 4 years knocking on the doors of, answering questions of at town halls, the exact type of people that are going to determine whether we are successful or fail this year. Never had a single one of them in tens of thousands of conversations ask me to add a justice to the Supreme Court. People are looking for a little bit of stability and practicality in our priorities. They want to know, where do we really stand at the end of the day? Adding justice to the Supreme Court is completely over their head, and I think every moment we're not talking about people and what they're going through right now is a wasted moment.
All right, I want to go back to our...
Yeah, can we both think? Yeah, I have the same thing. I have to agree. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, if they start attacking what we see going on with voting rights, the environment, recently the Clean Water Act, if they start going after Medicare, if they start really going after Social Security, there's a lot of things that this Supreme Court...
Aren't you doing
No,
what
I'm not.
they're saying, that there's decisions you don't like?
To my esteemed colleagues here, no one here is FDR, and he tried to do, and he wanted to do it too. And, he was a great Democrat who did great things for this country. Yes, you're right. No one is asking it. But what did FDR do? He said, if you will not allow us to help the American people,
okay,
I'm going to help the American people and get rid of you guys.
Representative Kenyatta, this will have to be the last word on this one.
No, thank you. I think that there's a couple of things that are being said here that are fundamentally false. We're not going to win this election by only going to doors in Western Pennsylvania that the congressman keeps referencing. The doors that we need to also be focused on, maybe even more focused on, are the doors that are in Philadelphia and southeastern Pennsylvania, the base of our party. And we keep acting as if the folks who show up for Democrats every election are somehow not as worth fighting for as some other folks. We're going to win this election by turning out folks in Philadelphia and southeastern Pennsylvania.
All right, I want to go back to our questioners now. Evie DeJesus of Penn Live has the next question, and this is for Representative Kenyatta.
Representative Kenyatta, we're going to go back to energy for a minute. President Biden recently walked back a campaign pledge to end new drilling on permits on public lands. Do you agree, and how do you see Pennsylvania's role in the natural gas economy?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with candidate Biden and disagree with what he did there. What I do support is releasing more petroleum out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. What I do support is actually making sure that we don't give 1 cent more in tax breaks to big polluters and actually put our investments into clean technologies of the future. And what I have said repeatedly is that a part of the increase that people are feeling at the pump, the sheets down the street, $4.09 before I came here, a part of that we have to acknowledge is that big oil and gas CEOs are making more money than they've ever made and are not passing on those savings to the consumers. And there are a number of different bills that people are talking about right now in Washington to make sure that they cannot do the type of greedy practices that have allowed companies like Shell and BP to make more money than they've ever made while still charging you more.
Time. This time, go ahead, you want to follow up?
Follow-up?
Sure.
What specific steps would you take to support, to ease the burden to Americans at the pump?
the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I mentioned right now that there are already permits that have been approved. And so if folks believe there needs to be more drilling and extraction, there are permits that folks can already use. But I think we have to look at this in the short, medium, and long term. And in the short term, strategic SPR. In the longer term, we need to make sure that Pennsylvania is the place where we're modernizing our buildings, building electric cars, leaning into the green energy future that everybody up here will tell you we need.
Time. Councilwoman Khalil.
I first want to answer that question about, what can we do now? And yes, I support the president because of the situation we're in. And the reason we're in this situation is that we're not thinking smart about how to use the tax code. So, for example, I think it's 50 cents per mile you get for mileage, and that usually goes to small businesses. I'd like to see that extended for the average employee, and where you would sit back and file a quarterly statement so that you could get some money back from your taxes for your gas mileage. So that would be one. Number two, I would increase it for truck drivers so that they have even a larger deduction in the tax code. Another thing I think we should look is what is the current technology that helps us save gas. There's idle technology that is currently used in Texas and in Ohio. We should be the government, we have the money, it's green technology, and we should provide grants to truck drivers, to Americans to install this idle technology to save us on gas.
Congressman Lamb.
So in answer to your question, yes, I support the administration's policy. You got to realize that we drill for both oil and natural gas, and both of those things have been taken off the world market in enormous quantities because of the war in Ukraine. Europe, the U.S., all of our allies, we're just not buying Putin's oil and gas anymore. So not only do we have a challenge supplying ourselves here at home and dealing with those prices going up, we've made specific commitments to help not only Ukraine, but all of our NATO allies try to replace that oil and natural gas, which we can only do by increasing production. So talking about repealing the federal gas tax and clean technologies of the future and all this other stuff, it sounds great. Not a single one of those will result in you walking out one day and seeing a lower price at the gas pump or a lower home heating bill or electric bill. That will happen if we increase production. You really cannot increase production if we don't do exactly what the administration's doing.
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
No, I do support the president in his decision to do what he did. And I'd also like to say that I've never taken a dime in campaign contributions in any of my campaigns from the extractive industries, ever. We need to make sure that we maintain and enhance our energy security. We have seen how fragile that can be on a world stage with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we can never be at the whim of a country like Russia or Iran or Venezuela for our energy. I spoke to members from the German embassy 2 weeks ago, and they said they've got us over a barrel, no pun intended. We are wed to their energy for the next 5 to 7 years minimum. We can never be at their mercy. And I support American energy. We need to have American energy. We need to transition and make investments to make green American energy, on an ongoing basis and evolve towards that. But right now, our energy security is paramount, particularly in a world that's been destabilized by the war in Ukraine. And I do support the release of the Strategic Petroleum Reserves and suspending the gas tax.
Can I just add one quick thing to the question she asked?
No, I mean, you'll get a closing statement if we will never get to all our questions. But I do have a follow-up for the Lieutenant Governor, because it's been mentioned several times tonight about suspending the federal gas tax.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I support that. I believe that will immediately make an impact at the pump.
18 cents.
What's that?
18 cents.
Yeah, 18 cents to a single mother, with 2 kids. 18 cents a gallon, it really matters as far as I'm concerned. And also, we need to be concerned with ExxonMobil making $10 billion a quarter in record profits. Crimea River, there's nothing we can do when they're raking in billions of dollars every quarter. There is a strong relationship.
I have to ask for a follow-up on that.
Same here. It's only fair.
I haven't asked you once for a follow-up.
All right, I'll break the rules a little bit. I know, I've lost control.
Well, don't do that. They'll call you a Republican.
No, I'm asking you for permission here rather than speaking up.
Okay, let's just go left to right. Representative Kenyatta.
I think 2 things I would say. John talks about the savings for a single mom. Well, you're gonna have those single moms driving over roads that are not fixed and paved. That is what that money actually goes to. And so it sounds nice to say we're gonna suspend the federal gas tax, but actually there's not gonna be that much savings. And then also when you talk about increasing production, that does not happen overnight. And so when you talk about pie in the sky ideas, it's not like we're just gonna go stick a straw in the ground and oil is gonna come out. It takes a long time to actually extract oil and natural gas.
Time. Councilwoman?
18 cents does matter. I was given an earful by the wife of a truck driver. She told me they're paying too much for fuel, and so it does matter. It does matter. Another thing, though, as we are going ahead and increasing production, there is no reason Americans should not get royalties the same way that they do in Alaska. Americans have a right to those royalties. We should be getting a check. So that's another way to which Americans can sit back as we're pumping and giving fuel to Europe. Another thing, it doesn't mean that we have to give up on environmental stewardship.
Time. Congressman Lamb, last word on this.
I mean, it's the difference between talk and results. 18 cents sounds good. Your price will not go down by 18 cents a gallon at the pump. Why? Because we collect the gas tax from the company. So unless John has some magical way to impose a price ceiling on these companies that they can't just charge you 18 cents more, which we don't have the authority to do, that's not going to happen. Meanwhile, your roads and your bridges and all your other infrastructure will get rebuilt more slowly. Why? Because the 18 cents gas tax goes into something called the Highway Trust Fund that we are using day after day after day right now to rebuild America's infrastructure.
All right, we're going to have to move on to our next question, and Paula Reed Ward of Trib Live in Pittsburgh has that question.
This question is for Councilwoman Khalil. Where do you stand on a path to citizenship for immigrants that are already in this country illegally?
Undocumented, I support them becoming citizens. I hope the president does it through executive order. But yes, I would introduce legislation and would support to make sure undocumented immigrants become legal residents. I am the daughter of immigrants. People come to this country many different ways, and they are a blessing. They enrich our society, they enrich our country. George Washington was an illegal immigrant, true story. And so, yes, I support legalization, making sure that we provide citizenship to undocumented residents. Thanks.
I do as well. The people who are here already obeying the law, paying their taxes, paying into Social Security and Medicare trust funds that they may never collect. We need them, and it's the American story. You know, my family had a path to citizenship because it was a different time, not because they had some different set of papers or any other different situation. What we've actually passed in the House of Representatives is a 5-year work permit for anyone in this situation. So it's not the exact same as a path to citizenship, but it's pretty good. And it could be renewed every 5 years after that. That made it into President Biden's Build Back Better bill this year. And that's the practical, realistic kind of thing that if we elect a senator from Pennsylvania, we might actually be able to get done in the U.S. Senate.
Lieutenant Governor?
Yeah. I'm married to a former dreamer. Her country fled a dangerous situation in Brazil when she was 7, and I absolutely support a path to citizenship for those immigrants that are already here. You know, it has been vexing our country for decades that we have refused to enact compassionate, comprehensive, and common sense immigration reform in this nation. We are not going to deport our way out of this. We are going to acknowledge that immigration makes America America. It makes it what America is special. And my wife's origin story has informed my own views to the point where we need to make sure we are honoring the contributions that they've made, and they deserve a path to legal citizenship. And I absolutely support comprehensive immigration reform in this country and would vote for that as your next United States Senator.
Representative Kenyatta?
So there are so many folks all across our country who are American in every sense of the word, except they're missing one piece of paper. These are folks who are members of your communities already, who are paying taxes, who deserve every opportunity to have access to the full American dream and what I call America's basic bargain. One good job backed up by a union, the ability for your kids to go to a good school, the ability to go to the doctor if you get sick and fill the prescription when you leave the appointment. And then that dignity of retiring with a level of security. And the congressman is right. Folks are paying into Social Security, but right now they're not even going to collect. The Lieutenant Governor is right. This is where lived experience matters and why we deserve a Senate and a senator that reflects the lived experience of working people all across the Commonwealth. And that's why I talk about this so much. This is how you see it impacts policy, and in some instances, impacts policymakers.
Time. All right, our next question is from Julia Taruso of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and it is for Congressman Lamb.
Thank you. In recent months, culture wars over LGBTQ rights have intensified, and laws targeting transgender rights have been introduced in state houses around the country. The Equality Act, which would afford protections to LGBTQ people against housing and employment discrimination, has stalled in Congress. Do you support the Equality Act? But also, what is your message to LGBTQ Pennsylvanians frustrated with a politically charged atmosphere that makes any immediate movement on federal legislation such as the Equality Act seem unlikely?
I do slight quibble. It has only stalled in the United States Senate. I always feel the need to defend the House's record because we have passed the Equality Act with my vote twice since I've been there. There are a lot of Pennsylvanians that are understandably not just frustrated but scared by the debate that's going on. Chambersburg here in our own state became one of the first towns to roll back an anti-discrimination ordinance. It's the kind of thing we wouldn't have to worry about if we had the Equality Act because it would put these protections into the federal laws to govern everyone. But what I think is so just distasteful about this is, you want to say to some of these Republican politicians, how about you pick on somebody your own size? They're going after children, kids who, may have questions that seem unusual to a lot of families, but they have them. And if that's your kid and you're their parent, you want to make sure you get those questions answered by people that know what they're talking about. You don't want your child dragged out into the public and thrown off the sports team and made into a spectacle because of something that they really are experiencing. So I'm against all these efforts to scapegoat kids. I think we can make good policy without doing that.
Can I ask, since you brought up sports teams, do you believe transgender women should be allowed to play on women's sports teams at the youth through college level?
I think there are different answers along that spectrum. I really do. So at the youth level, let's let kids be kids. I'm just not aware of any cases where it has posed any sort of a problem, at least where I represent. I think once you get to something like NCAA Division I, they already have rules. They already do testing. They have very specific criteria, which, by the way, the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, has met every single time. So I think people have a lot of questions about whether those rules are modern enough and accurate, but that's a question for the NCAA. It's not a question for the U.S. Congress.
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
I think if any political party or elected official attempts to score points at the expense of a trans child or any members of those communities, they need to find a new line of work. I mean, it's absolutely reprehensible. It's tough enough already to be a teenager. If you're part of a marginalized community like that, to be singled out by whether it's a governor or whether it's legislators is just fundamentally unacceptable. I have long been a strong proponent and ally of this. I'm proud to say in 2013, I was the only elected elected official to solemnize a same-sex wedding when it was still illegal. Governor Corbett at the time threatened to have me arrested, actually, for performing that. So we, as a state, have failed miserably at delivering equal protection under the law to our residents. It's something that's long overdue. It's something that it should have always been. And if I'm your next United States Senator, basic fundamental equality and not singling out members of this community is an absolute priority of mine.
And since I asked Congressman Lamb, do you believe transgender women should be allowed to play on women's sports teams at the youth through college level?
Yes, and I want to qualify that too and say, like I said, if you are looking to score points and gain advantage by singling out and going after trans athletes or children, again, it's time to find a new line of work. We as a nation need to be better than that. We need to be inclusive and we need to be compassionate. And as I've always said, compassion and understanding is always the right side of history, and we will look back on that as a shameful chapter if we don't immediately stop.
Representative Kenyatta, Equality Act.
So for folks who are at home who can't see the full auditorium, right to my left over there is my husband, Dr. Matt. And when I'm your next United States Senator, for the first time in American history, we're going to have an openly gay man in the U.S. Senate who is going to bring my entire life and family and perspective to a body that is in desperate need of that perspective. It makes no sense that right now with 50 votes in the Senate, we haven't already passed the Equality Act. It's wrong. And right now in Pennsylvania, under state law, depending on which county or municipality you're in, you either have protections as an LGBTQ person or you don't. That patchwork approach is wrong. And it was heartbreaking to watch the hearings for soon-to-be Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and hearing senators openly opine about whether or not same-sex marriage is settled law.
Time.
And would you answer on transgender women in sports?
So I got a chance to vote against legislation just like that at the state level, which they called the Women's Sports Act or Women's Protection of Sports Act. And really what we know is all of this nonsense that you're hearing is not about protecting girls or women in sports. They don't care about equal pay for female athletes. They don't care about making sure the facilities in which kids are practicing are equal, whether it's a girl or a young boy. They don't care about that. All they care about is attacking little kids. And we know that this legislation has led to increased amounts of suicide attempts and suicidal ideation by trans and LGBTQ kids. It must come to an end.
All right, let's go back to our. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
I'm proud to be a council person from Jenkintown, which passed an anti-discrimination clause. You cannot discriminate in Jenkintown against race, gender, sexual identity. And I'm also proud to say that we just recently restarted the Human Relations Commission. Having said that, I want everyone to step back. Girls are already playing in boys' sports. So I'm not sure where this craziness is coming from, other than the very person, and I'm so glad you voted against this, has gone against immigrants. And I'm going to call her out by her name. Her name is Martina White. Martina White goes out, must be a very sick person, because originally she used to go out against immigrants. She was extremely anti-immigrant. She was Trump before Trump. Right? So she spent her entire time when she was running going after immigrants. Well, now that her community is very much immigrant, she's found another scapegoat, gay kids. And so I'm saying to Martina, thou does protest too much, and you need to go pick on somebody else and do your job and help your community.
All right, we're going to do at least one more lightning round question. We're going to start with Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. And this one is, Julie, maybe you can explain a little bit where this came from.
Sure, thank you. This question comes to us from a reader of the Inquirer's election newsletter, which you can sign up for at inquirer.com/PA2022. Our reader asks, negative campaign ads seem to poison voters' attitudes toward all politicians. Since some of those politicians eventually become our elected leaders, do you think something needs to be done to temper this negativity? And if so, what?
Yes. Yeah, I do, and I walk my talk. I am running an absolute clean, issue-oriented race here. I do not have a super PAC that is running negative ads, telling lies, quite frankly. But someone here on this stage does. And I would ask that he disavow that and run a positive campaign, especially when you're using a Republican attack line calling one of us a socialist. I'll do something that Connor won't. Connor is not a socialist, but neither am I, and I would just ask for him to acknowledge that.
Since he mentioned you by name, Congressman Lamb, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. It's not my ad to disavow. John knows that. And the reason that he doesn't want people talking about so-called Republican talking points is because he has no answer for him. He can't stand up to him. So I'll put it in my own words. Those aren't my words in the commercial. My own words are that John's record and his history, the choices he has made, place him too far to the extreme to win at the statewide level in Pennsylvania. When he was running around the state in his gym shorts, making marijuana the #1 issues in campaigning with Bernie Sanders, he lost a lot of the swing voters in our state already. He can pretend to be someone different now, but that's who they're going to see.
Representative Kenyatta, same question.
I think that there is a difference between erroneous, false attacks and talking about someone's record. If we can't in the primary draw distinctions, then when is the right time to do it? I think everybody on this stage is committed to supporting whoever the Democratic nominee is. We have elections, not auctions. And so we don't get to not talk about John's record, particularly of chasing down an unarmed black guy with a 2-gauge shotgun because it makes him uncomfortable. We have to talk about it either now or we can talk about it in November, but we're going to have to discuss it.
I just want to thank you for the commercials because as I was canvassing in the Northeast, some lady told me, thank you for knocking on my door and doing the legwork because I'm tired of the commercials. So thank you, gentlemen. But having said that, you know, the negativity, this is a free country. Really, I don't believe really that we should be censoring ads like that. If Americans don't like it, turn off your TV and come out and canvass with me. So that's really very much what I believe. But real quick about the socialist thing, you know, we're paying Europeans for their health care.
I hate to say it, time.
Okay, I'm going to answer that because it's wrong.
Okay, go ahead. Congressman Lamb?
I think I've said what I had to say here. It wasn't my ad to disavow, so I don't.
No, but it's not the question in particular.
I'm sorry.
If you had any thoughts on the reader's question about how negative campaign ads can kind of poison the perception of elected leaders.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think that I've had a lot of people tell me over the years they don't like negative ads. I don't typically run them, but I do think you have to leave space to have what can be an uncomfortable family discussion, especially in a primary like this one. And so we make our best efforts day to day to do that in as respectful and clear a manner as possible. Sometimes certain of your supporters may go a different direction with it, but just because something is uncomfortable or makes us you don't love the brightness or appeal of it, we still have to talk about it to get in a good position.
You said that we could answer if you
Not
were
right
attacked.
now. Not right now.
If you were attacked, because actually when he said about Bernie Sanders, I was a Bernie Sanders delegate.
Listen, that's
so
a bit
I think I should
indirect,
answer to
and
that.
I only have a few minutes, and you only have a few minutes left. So another lightning round question, though, and this goes to Representative Kenyatta. Name a living Republican you admire and why.
A living Republican I admire?
Yes.
Representative Wendy Thomas, who's one of my colleagues in the House, she and I have a bill called Phillips Law. I had an 11-year-old kid who died by suicide in my district, Little Phil. Getting that call from his grandmother is still probably the toughest day I've had as a legislator. And I introduced that bill with her to reimagine the way we provide mental health care for our kids. I talked to actually then Vice President Biden about this in New Hampshire when I was campaigning for him and asked him to consider putting this in his policy, and it's on the Biden-Harris website.
I hate to cut you off talking about suicide, but you know. Let's see. Let's go to the councilwoman next, and a living Republican that you admire and why.
I hope I get his name right. It's either Hud or Hurd from Texas. And he's no longer in Congress, but I just recently read an article about him in which he properly critiqued Democrats. And actually, he really worked real well with the gentleman who's running for governor out in Texas. But what I liked what he said is that instead of Democrats pointing to what they do and good, so for example, our new Supreme Court justice, he said she has such incredible credentials. Why are we talking about her great credentials? Thank you. So, yes.
Congressman Lamb?
I would say that the 10 House Republican colleagues of mine who voted to impeach Trump the second time, I don't think it's possible to really communicate what the environment was like down there after January 6th, but every single day people were more on edge than any environment I've ever been around. And for those 10 members, they were not only potentially throwing away their political career, and a lot of them have been run out of the House since then. They took on a real personal safety risk for them and their families to do the right thing, and I think history is going to reward them very richly as a result.
Lieutenant Governor?
I have two, actually. One is a former professor of mine, Senator Alan Simpson, a Republican from Wyoming, a pro-choice, kind, thoughtful Republican senator from Wyoming, if you can imagine that was actually true at one point in time in our history. The second one is my father as a Republican. And he, I think, taught and instilled good quality values of compassion, integrity, and public service. And he's a shining example of, party does not define a person's character. And those are two Republicans that I've admired greatly.
Time. All right, now we are short on time, and I'm going to try to get another lightning round question in and time for your closing statement. So let's stick to the 30 seconds. How do you handle stress? Councilwoman, let's start with you. 30 seconds.
How do I handle stress? I just do. I'm a mom. I just go ahead and I take care of my house. I take care of my family. I talk to my parents. I pray. I pray a lot. And I garden, and I have dinner with my friends, and I just live life and juggle. And so that's how I handle stress.
Congressman Lamb?
I go out looking for people that I represent, and invariably you'll find one who puts it all in perspective for you, because what a lot of them are going through is way, way worse than anything I have to deal with in this job. So,
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, stress.
I'm just so incredibly blessed to have three beautiful children, age 13, 10, and 8. And for stress relief, nothing beats hanging out with them at home. I live for it, and that's one of the downsides of all this campaigning is I don't get to see them and tuck them in and help them with their homework. FaceTime is great, but it's a poor proxy to actually being there.
Representative Kenyatta, stress.
Yeah, you know, life for me ain't been no crystal stair, I'll tell you that. I mentioned that I lived 6 places by the time I graduated high school. Lost both of my parents by the time I was 27. And so it's been tough, but 2 things never fail me. A, going on a walk. Ain't nothing just like an aimless walk to just help you think through things. The second, I would highly recommend everybody do, other than going to malcolmkenyatta.com and being part of the campaign, is going to netflix.com and watching The Great British Bake Off. There is just no happier show on TV, period.
All right, we've come to the end of the debate. I want to thank you, the 4 of you, for being with us today. You each have 30 seconds for a closing statement, and I believe it is Councilwoman Khalil's turn to lead off this time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Pennsylvania, you are amazing. Pennsylvanians, you surprise me every day. I want to tell you folks an amazing story that happened to me this weekend. I went to a house of worship. I'm Muslim, it's Ramadan, and in the middle of Schuylkill County is a mosque. And I'm going to go visit this mosque. And I met a woman, and a white woman, and we started talking politics, and I gave her my card, and she goes, oh no, I love Trump. And so I go, so what are you doing here? And she goes, real quick. So she says that, hey, I take care of this place.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Congressman Lamb, 30 seconds.
I want to thank you for your time and attention, and just ask you in the next 3 weeks, as you make up your mind, think about what it's going to take to succeed in a year like this. I'm the only one standing in front of you tonight who has ever beaten a Republican head-to-head in a situation like this, and I've done it 3 times. Some of the things that John would criticize me for, although he's wrong in the particulars, are some of the things that make me appeal to people in the middle. That's not a luxury item for us. It's something we absolutely have to have. You do it by having common sense, eliminating distractions, and getting support from the left of your party, the right, and the center. We need them all. I can do it.
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman.
Thanks. I'm the only candidate on this stage or on the Republican side that's running one statewide here in Pennsylvania. I've consistently campaigned on core Democratic values and principles, and if you send me to Washington, if you trust me with your vote in May, you'll always have my vote in Washington, D.C. to be that 51st vote, to be decisive in tilting the balance of the Senate to make sure that we can get stuff done in Washington, D.C., because we need to meet the moment as a party, and I promise you, you won't read about me changing my mind. Send me to be that 51st vote.
Representative Kenyatta, last word.
This is pretty simple. If we want a government that works for working people, we have to elect working people. I don't know a Democrat in Pennsylvania or outside of Pennsylvania that wants to lose this race. But the only way that we're going to win is by making sure we have massive turnout among our regional and demographic base, that we're able to excite voters all across the Commonwealth with a message about why it matters to have a bigger, bolder Democratic majority. I've talked about what I will fight for as your senator. Now I'm asking for your vote. Thank you so much.
All right. We're coming to a close for the 2022 Pennsylvania, the Spotlight Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate debate. Again, I want to thank all 4 candidates. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Also, I'd like to thank our organizing sponsor of tonight's event, Spotlight PA, in partnership with sponsors of tonight's debate, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Trib Live, Penn Live, WITF, PCN, and of course here at Dickinson College. A reminder that Spotlight PA and partners will be hosting another debate, U.S. Senate debate, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the same location at Dickinson College. The Republican candidates will be with us tomorrow.
Our own here in the United States, and also
May
we're
17th.
developing a sense of inflation as
Thank
well
you
too,
for
because of
joining us tonight.
the logistical
Have a good
logjam,
night.
because we are not making enough stuff here in the United States, and also we're developing a sense of inflation as well too, because of the logistical logjam, because we are not making
You've
enough
been
stuff.
watching live coverage of a debate featuring the Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate. Tonight's event was held at Dickinson College in Carlisle and was sponsored by Spotlight PA. Now that you've watched the debate, we'd like to hear what you think. Our guests for the next hour are Chris Gorst, Director of the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion, and Terry Madonna, Senior Fellow in Residence at